Thank you so much for joining us. Everybody feel good? Got some energy in here? Okay, perfect. Well, we are thrilled to be on this stage today, and a big thank you to South by Southwest for the opportunity to sponsor the Work Reimagined track. I'm going to kick it off by just introducing myself, telling you a little bit about who we are, and then I'll pass it over to my esteemed panelists to do the same, and then we'll hop into the conversation. So my name is Rachel D. Lattimore. I'm a vice president at the Blackstone Charitable Foundation. If you all are not familiar, we are an arm of Blackstone, the world's largest alternative asset manager, investment firm, and our mission really is around career mobility and community impact, and we do that through our grant-making programs and our best-in-class employee engagement programs. And I'm here to talk about our signature program, which is LaunchPad, which you all have seen us upstairs. Hopefully you came to our reception yesterday. And LaunchPad is really committed to connecting our first-gen and low-income college students to career exposure, internships, and other career-building opportunities. And so we're going to talk about how we do that today. But we're really excited to be in conversation just to talk about what it looks like to partner with folks, and I know we hear this word all the time, in an ecosystem to really drive this work forward. We just left a lunch, some colleagues and I, where we were talking about just the gaps between supply and demand for internships. How do we have a more cohesive conversation around employers, around programs that actually train folks to be prepared to go into the workforce? And what does that mean for students who are coming from backgrounds where they don't have people at home that have been through the process? And so we'll get into that today in our conversation. But before we go too far, I want to pass it over to our panelists to introduce who they are, and I'll hand it over to Antoine to kick us off.
Hello, everybody. My name is Antoine Foreman. I am an entrepreneurship professor and a campus director at North Carolina A&T State University. A large portion of my role is to instill innovation skills and an entrepreneurial mindset, no matter the major or the career path. We've been able to engage over 6,000 students on our campus across 42 out of the 56 majors on campus, and 500 students across 30 other universities that have come to our programming. So it's been a very enriching and a great experience.
Hey folks, Sheila Sarum, I'm CEO and founder of Basta. We are based out of New York, and we're focused on connecting first-gen college students to great first jobs. We've been singularly focused on that group of young people for the last 8 years, and we do that through direct work with students. We have a tech tool that I'm excited to share a little bit more about, and we do it through partnerships. So we are on 300 campuses now in 40 states, in part thanks to this great partnership with Blackstone.
Hello, everybody. My name is Marlon Evans. Actually, I started my career in higher ed, working in the admissions office at Stanford, and then left and spent some time in K through 12 at the KIPP Foundation. So coming to this conference, I feel like I'm back with my tribe again. So this is awesome. I'm currently the CEO at NextCubed. We're a startup accelerator investing in early stage companies, as well as the founder of the HBCU Founders Initiative, which is a nonprofit that provides pre-acceleration programming on HBCU campuses. We've served over 1,200 students across 80 HBCUs since 2021.
Awesome, thank you. So excited to be in conversation with you all today. For those of you who just walked in, we are having a conversation today around entrepreneurial skills for career mobility, and how do you really work with partners to leverage that to support students. And so again, LaunchPad, really our mission is to close the opportunity gap for first generation and low income college students by connecting them to skills training and career exposure such as internships. And we do that in partnership with colleges and universities, but also nonprofit partners that focus on career readiness training and development, skills training, and development that are supporting first-gen low-income college students. And you might want to know, well, why focus on first-generation low-income college students? Why? I'm sure I don't have to explain this to the folks in this room, but just to kind of level set and kind of ground us in where we are in the space right now, I want to share a few statistics with you as to why we chose to lean into this work. So we know that internships are catalytic for students, right? But what we have found is that there is a 22% gap in internship participation between first-generation college students and their non-first-gen peers. And yet over 50% of all students in the U.S. right now are first-gen. Right? So there's a huge market opportunity for us to really lean into this particular community of students and providing them with access to resources that will get them better set up for success as they go into trying to get that strong first job. And many of you, I'm sure, and I'd just love to understand by you raising your hands, how many of you had an internship? Yeah. And I'm sure that for many of you, which I don't know if you're able to see with these beautiful lights, but almost everyone raised their hand in this room, it was a transformative experience for you and really kicked off your career. And that's what we're really trying to do. In order to get to that strong first job, you have to have the exposure, the opportunity to cultivate your skills, and you need to build that social capital, and that's what we're here to talk about today. What we decided to do at Blackstone through the Charitable Foundation is that we are in partnership with the larger firm, right? So what does that mean? How do we leverage our assets? Well, Blackstone has over 230 portfolio companies, which employs over 700,000 people. What does that mean? That means that we have direct access to talent acquisition teams, to CHROs, to folks who are making hiring decisions and who are able to influence internship programs and opportunities of where they're recruiting and getting their pipeline from. And so we said, well, we are best positioned to continue to forge those relationships to be able to create more opportunities for students, right? We know that there are not enough seats, right, for students, or not enough internship opportunities, which is why we partner with organizations like HBCUFI to actually create those opportunities. But we're also partnering with our portfolio companies to say, hey, this is a value proposition for you. We have incredible talent that are trained, that they're job ready, and let us be a curator for you. Let us connect you to this great pipeline of students that we have, where you may not have the capacity, especially if you're a small to mid-cap company, you don't have the same level of resources. So we're providing not only students with opportunities, but we're providing employers with access to incredible talent, larger pipelines, and also providing them with resources to be able to establish strong internship programs. And it really is a win-win for everyone, right? So we're so excited about this work. And now I kind of want to get into the mechanics of how it works. Before I do that, I just want to note, we're still learning in this space, right? We launched this program in 2023 with 100 students that we place in internship opportunities across startups, like I just mentioned here, Blackstone, the firm itself, and our portfolio companies. Last year, we more than doubled that program. 275 students were placed into these opportunities. And so today, 375 students have had opportunities, paid internship opportunities, paid. The key word here. Paid internship opportunities that have literally transformed, for many of them, not only their career trajectories, but their lives. And we have stories, just as the young woman was saying before, telling the stories are so important. And we have the stories to just demonstrate that impact. So I want to now turn it over to, as we talk about what does this actually look like on the ground. A lot of those students are coming from our universities and colleges. Antoine is a huge champion of our work. He's a fantastic director. And I have to say, I'm a little biased because he went to my alma mater, North Carolina A&T. But that's Aggie Pride, yes. Thank you. This is why, but this is not why he's on stage, right? Like he's on stage because he actually does the work. So, Antoine, can you talk to us a little bit about just the student engagement at A&T is incredible, right? What are you doing that really helps your students really think about these opportunities to really lean into these opportunities, and kind of talk us through what are you doing to create more career exposure and also training for students so that they're showing up ready for these opportunities?
A large portion of what we do, honestly, is teaching the students how to align themselves with the opportunity. Oftentimes, the students are more afraid and more timid because they don't feel like they may be prepared for the opportunity or they don't know where to go. And I took that as a personal mission, really, to get them connected, but also help them feel pre-prepared. So, for example, we do things like innovation sprints and business competitions and one-on-one office hours, but a lot of those are actually tailored particularly to real-world problems organizations are having, and skill sets that they need. So they get pre-trained before they go into the opportunity, which makes so a lot more students honestly show up. But also it helps us show, especially as an HBCU, what our students have to offer. And they're being able to step up to the plate already trained for that opportunity overall. And it shows itself in different ways. Yeah. I think the innovation sprints have been wonderful because it allows them to see those problems, really figure out how to solve an issue, realize how to dive into the issue, and realize solutions are systemic. Mm-hmm. So how to use their major as a whole and the benefits and power of their major uniquely to approach business problems and get them outside the academic buildings, and I like to call them academic boxes they're used to see how they can apply those skills in ways that may not actually be talked about in the classroom sometimes.
Yeah, so I want to kind of dig into this a little bit more. So for folks in the audience who are not familiar with an innovation sprint, what do you mean?
Well, I work with organizations and figure out what problems they may have or what problems they find important. Some of those problems may be internal, some of them may be about social responsibility and things they value overall as an organization. And then we position that into a framework that students can understand and really create sometimes a one-pager or a two-pager about that problem and then challenge students to dive into it. Sometimes students may have anywhere small as a day to sometimes as long as a semester to really dive into that problem and for them to figure out solutions using their major to solve that issue, and then to be coached through that process. So you're really pushing them outside their comfort zone, but also challenging their critical thinking and challenging their creativity to go further every step of the way.
Yeah, so you're talking about these entrepreneurial skills, right? Critical thinking, creativity, growth mindset, leadership. So students are leveraging an opportunity to get in front of a company. And on the student side, they get to exercise these skills, practice them in real time in a way that, one, demonstrates that they have the aptitude to push the challenge forward, to identify and solve a problem very innovatively with the team, right? But it gives them something that they can leverage in their own portfolio as they're going before employer partners. And what I love is that it's also an opportunity for employers to identify talent, right? Like, you come, you have a challenge, you're looking for fresh ideas, you're looking for fresh talent, and these micro opportunities, if you will, creates a talent development pipeline that sometimes you don't recognize as such, but they're unique ways to engage employer partners. So I really love that and love the thinking around that. Sheila, I really would love to hear, as we're thinking about career exposure and interests, before we can even get to the exposure part, like how are we and how are you, through our partnership, helping students to really identify their career interests, what they are in general, like taking that first step? Some students know, others don't. What is BASTA doing to really help students to identify those interests and then position themselves accordingly with the right opportunities?
Yeah, it turns out figuring out what you want to do is not so easy. I think we come back to that over and over again. We saw lots of people sort of having that reckoning around COVID. Who am I? What do I care about? What do I want to do now? So when we're thinking about students, I think one of the things that we discovered that will feel pretty intuitive once we talk about it is there's so many inputs. what are my drivers? Do I care more about making money, or do I care about making an impact? Am I an extrovert or an introvert? Do I want to work in teams? Do I want to work alone? Do I want to be in a sort of highly structured environment or a low structured environment? Then what's my major? What's my salary expectation? What are my skills? How do I know, right? There's so many variables. And what we've done at Basta is sort of taken all of that and put it into a career navigation tool called Seeker. So really democratize access to this kind of information. And through Seeker, students in under 20 minutes can take an assessment, and it spits out for them a really concrete, you are here, and these are the things that you might need to learn about yourself, or the things that you may need to do to be able to move forward on your career readiness journey. So what we find is oftentimes you might hear a student say something like, I want to be a social worker, and I want to earn $100,000 a year. Or I want to go into finance because I really want to help people. Or I want to be a doctor because I really want to make money. Like, these are the kinds of sort of what we call like patterns of misalignment or misconception that that makes sense if you're first gen, because maybe you haven't had that natural exposure over your college experience to be able to sort of debunk some of those myths or some of those sort of beliefs that you hold. So Seeker allows Basta and allows our partners and our students to very quickly sort of understand where they are. And then we can start to help put the right things in place for young people so they can move along that career readiness journey. So we do that through sort of providing really personalized career readiness workshops to young people once they complete the Seeker survey, so that they're getting exactly what they need when they need it. And I'll just say a couple things about Seeker, because I just think it's been really profound. So we've had over 12,000 students take Seeker. We have millions of data points we've collected on students over the last several years, and we've found that whether you're a freshman, junior, sophomore, it doesn't really matter where you are in your college journey. There's not a real direct correlation with clarity around the workforce. So we can't use sort of where you are in college as a way to determine how much you know about the workforce. And in fact, 75% of students who take our assessment are sort of in that first phase of their journey, meaning they still need to know more about who they are in order to make smart decisions. So that's really important for us as educators and as service providers to think about how are we giving young people lots and lots of opportunities to experience different kinds of careers so that they can start to make smarter choices about what they do. That's why innovation sprints are so critical, because young people get to be immersed in problems that, real world problems that companies are putting in front of them. We also found, which I think is really fascinating, that we didn't find any correlation in our data around like GPA and level of exposure. So you could be killing it in all your classes, like a model student, but as a first-gen student still have really no exposure to the careers that are out there. So we really have to be intentional about making sure that young people are getting those opportunities to learn about different jobs through their college experience.
Yeah, and you touched on something that I think is really critical, right? It's not just about opportunities and access, but it's also about this social capital piece. And you guys did a huge study on this. Can you talk to us a little bit more about the importance of social capital, particularly as we're talking about first generation college students or those who might be their first in the family to go to college? And how are you all leveraging what you found in that research to really support your work?
Yeah, so if we think about getting a job as who you know and what you know is actually really pretty comprehensive, as we just talked about. The who you know matters just as much. And we often, I think students just take networking as sort of maybe this transactional thing, like I'm gonna go to this event, I'm gonna find you on LinkedIn. And so what we started to really unpack was who are in young people's networks. And you need your friends, you need the people who are your peers, you need your near peers also, because your near peers give you that sort of like just-in-time advice. They just went through a job interview that you're about to go through. But what we found what young people really need in their networks are the senior professionals, because those are the folks that can open doors for them. So all of those sort of relationships matter, but that relationship in particular, that professional, is an accelerant for young people to get a great job. So when we think about the opportunity to work in partnership, when Blackstone is bringing employers to the table, right? These sort of senior professionals who are meeting young people, there's a sort of two-way value exchange there. Having caring adults on campus who can help open doors and bring folks together. All of those nodes are really, really important, but having those sort of senior folks in the network are critical.
Yeah, thank you. So, Marlon, let's move on to you, right? You're in a unique space in that, one, you own and operate a VC, but then you took a step back and said, okay, where is there a need? And created HBCUFI, and the work that you all are doing there is incredible. When you sort of think about identifying talent for your portfolio, right? You see folks come in, they come to you, they say, hey, we need money, we've got an idea, we need some support. What are you seeing in the space right now in terms of skills? When we want to think about entrepreneurial skills, what are some of the skills that you're seeing in terms of the needs that your portfolio folks have as they're looking for talent, and how it has partnering with LaunchPad really helped you to kind of think about this as a talent development pipeline for those portfolio companies?
Yeah, absolutely. But first, I need Seeker because I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. Yeah, I think when you think about early stage startups, it's typically a couple friends who decided to launch a company. So the needs are across the board. I mean, from everything from on the product side to marketing to sales to creative. I mean, they need help just in general. So this program has been huge because typically in order for them to kind of access that type of support, they are leaning on other friends and family or volunteers. And when you're dealing with volunteers, you kind of get what you pay for. You know, they're volunteers. And so you don't get that kind of structured support. Whereas with this program, the fact that we're able to leverage kind of paid interns who are really passionate about learning about early stage kind of startups and growth, it's hugely beneficial to the companies because this is talent they wouldn't have been able to access otherwise. And for the students, I think it's an amazing kind of first entree into the workforce because you are required to wear a lot of different hats because you're not just coming in saying, I'm the product guy. You'll find yourself being asked to do things completely maybe outside of your typical skill set, but that exposure is huge. So from a talent kind of pipeline perspective, we're excited to be able to introduce our companies to some really strong, talented students. And then from the student perspective, they can walk away from that summer experience telling kind of future potential employers, I was not only the sales guy, I was the marketing person, I was also doing, helping with coding. And so that's kind of an amazing thing to be able to check all those boxes in a very short period of time.
Yeah, I love that. This is what I love about this partnership is because it really gives, not all students, to Sheila's point, know exactly what they want to do. And this is why exposure is so key, right? So to be able to go into a space and try on a number of different hats and say, not only, oh, this was really cool, but also, you know what? I don't think this is what I want to do is also very important, right? For students to be able to identify as they're sort of getting closer and closer to what's the best fit for me, and how do I align my skill sets with the opportunities that I'm finding. So we really appreciate the partnership because of that, right? Give students a broader opportunity to really kind of tap into learning and exposure and interest. So I want to kind of move to how are we measuring all of this, right? It sounds great, but what are the things that we're doing to really understand what is the impact that we're having? How can we measure this? And so, Antoine, I really want to kind of point this question to you and ask, how do you measure the effectiveness of things like innovation sprints or experiential learning? I mean, you just got back from Dubai, taking a group of students there. Like, what does it look like to measure that? How are you knowing that students are actually benefiting from the opportunity, gaining skills, and being able to leverage them for their career mobility? And just sort of maybe walk us through some key components of what success looks like in that type of programming, and what are you seeing across your students?
I think overall the measurement piece is honestly tiered, right? We have to measure things like, how many students are going to events and how many seats or heads are in the seat. But I think a bigger portion of measure for me is on the short term. If 10% of those students don't come back to me at the end of the event and say what's next, then I start to question the impact of that event. on a short-term standpoint. In the long term, though, I look at where the students are going. I don't just want to get the students hired. I want to get them hired in places that pay well and hire in places that always say I want to get them into a dark place and teach them how to shine their light and let that light be a beacon for other students who are coming into that situation. So I look at where they're going. I think a major proponent of that is that with our program, the graduating salary of students who come through our program at least once a week, we've seen they have a 50% higher salary than the university salary. So we're graduating students who are coming out at $90K and above based on the programs that we're actually doing. Another major piece of that is with our partners. I've started looking at partners, not that we have the best relationship with up front, right? Every university has partners that come and then they leave for a little while. And they come and they leave for a little while. And we see that all the time. And I started purposely talking to those partners and saying, hey, what skills gaps are you seeing? Why are we not seeing consistent engagement, right? What problems should they be exposed to? And building the programs around those problems, around those skills, allow me to also talk to the partner and say, you took on these interns, how has it changed? How has their performance changed? How has their development changed? You took on some individuals for full-time offers, right? Where are they placed? What has the development been? And that has been another great measure of success for us. And then students actually wanting to pour and give back. If you develop a student well enough, you don't have to ask them to come back for funding. You don't have to ask them to come back for engagement. And the number of students, honestly, who contact me via LinkedIn to pour back into the current students after they graduate is another major component and metric of success to me.
Yeah, right. It's this notion of what Sheila mentioned earlier, that near-to-peer relationship, building that social capital, somebody who has similar lived experience as I do, who has gone through this process, can come back and tell me exactly, like, here's what happens on the other side, here's how I got here, encouraging other folks in that way. I want to know, you mentioned a really interesting statistic, right? How your students are graduating with much higher salaries. What do you think is the special sauce in being able to produce those outcomes? Because if I was at A&T and I heard that, I'd change majors, I'd knock on your door, I'd do whatever I could to get into your program. What is it that you're learning that's helping to sort of produce some of these outcomes?
We aren't pushing students to change majors, but we have seen more students actually minor or engage with innovation and entrepreneurship because we have an I&E degree at A&T. So some of them are double major and they're minoring out because of that exposure. I think another thing regarding exposure we don't talk about as often is we talk about exposure to career paths and exposure to industries. Sometimes we don't talk about the exposure to how your major integrates within that industry, how your major integrates within that career path, and that your major is a toolbox in a way. It doesn't define your career, but it gives you a set of tools for you to use throughout your career to be able to grow yourself. And once students begin to realize that they are their first business and they're learning these innovation and entrepreneurship skills to make sure they better themselves as their first business, it turns on a light bulb that is turned on in a very unique way.
Right. So transferable skills that you can apply across industry, sector, et cetera. And how do you leverage understanding those skills to be able to translate into how you can create value for a business, irrespective of your major? I love that. Sheila, so your program has incredible stickiness. I like that word, stickiness. What drives this, and how does BASTA measure and track outcomes, especially with the number of data points that you all have? Can you talk to us a little bit about how your team is able to do that effectively?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the fact that we get to start at the young person's, like where the young person is really important to our program model. And I think I've been in a couple of other sessions where we've been talking about like caseload models, like 1 to 500 students, 1 to 3,000 students. And I think as long as we have that as our frame, like I have to individually have conversations with each of these students to understand their starting point and push them along, it's always gonna feel like a losing battle. And so I think with Seeker, what we're able to do is very quickly be able to diagnose among a bunch of students what their starting points are. And so when I'm having a conversation with a student, or when an advisor is having a conversation with a student, we're starting from the student's starting point. We all already know where the student is. So from a one-to-one perspective, that's really helpful. I think when we lift up the levels, whether we're talking about 20,000 students on a campus or a state level, and we start looking at the data in the aggregate, you can start to do some really cool stuff. So I think about, an incoming freshman class at a college where you administer Seeker to all the students, and you realize, gosh, 20% of these students are saying to us the thing they care most about in their college experience, the reason they're here is to get a high-paying job. We should pull these students out, right, at orientation and do a session on, the most high-paying jobs, a 90-mile radius from this college, because we know that's typically, how far students go. So I think we can start to do just some really interesting things where students feel seen and known, and that their priorities and their needs are sort of at the center of our work. And that can be really hard when we're driving this solely through relationships without data, without frameworks, without trying to center what the students' needs are. And that can be really hard if you're not doing it with data and technology. So I think both those things matter a ton. And then what we do, and you can go to projectbasta.com/the Insights Hub, and we put all of our data out. We share all of our insights, because the more data we collect and the more we learn about students, the better we can sort of adapt our programming to student needs. And so we do that ourselves. We also do it through partnerships. So we are not on the ground in all these colleges. We work with incredibly committed staff who know their students, and so they're able to activate their students in ways that we're not trying to, because we recognize how important those relationships are. I will say one word about exposure, because I just think this is, we've been talking about exposure so much, and after the first 5,000 students took Seeker, we were like, what are we learning? There's got to be some really cool stuff in here. And what we ultimately found was students who have what we call a high exposure score, which simply means they know a little bit about a lot of industries. And so that might be through these startup internships, that might be through an innovation sprint, that might be through a really great conversation they had with a practitioner. But students who had high exposure scores were just more likely to get great jobs. And we actually looked at lots of different variables. So we looked at students who've had one internship. And actually having a high exposure score was a better indicator, or more highly correlated with getting a great job than a singular internship, because the internship is a means to an end. It's really important, but as we're thinking about working with young people, there's so many ways that we can be driving exposure for them. But also I think the sort of the feedback loop, which is, if you've never worked with a first-gen college student and then you get the opportunity to work with a first-gen college student through an internship, you're like, oh, of course I want to hire a first-gen student. They've figured out how to get to college, figured out how to get through college, find resources even when they're not readily available. So I do think that two-way exposure that we don't talk as much about is so important, because once you've worked with a first-gen student, you're like, oh, I'm exclusively hiring first-gen students, because we know how to hustle. Yes. That's really important.
Yeah, and I think that this is a great transition point here, because again, as we think about our partnership with HBCUFI and thinking about building a talent pipeline, Marlon, as you're now going into the third cycle. You were with us at the very beginning when we launched this program. What advice would you have to other VCs in the space about how they could use this as an opportunity to really think about building talent pipelines for their own portfolios, and what would you say to them about just the value of this work?
Yeah, no, I would encourage them, not as long as they didn't displace us from the partnership. But no, it's huge. I think for all, in particular for venture capital firms that recognize the talent. When we talk about what do startups need, it kind of comes into one of three categories. They need capital, they need community, and they need customers. On the community side, that's typically where they have the biggest challenge. We get back to this fact of the network not having necessarily access to those humans in their network who can kind of open doors on their behalf. So the fact that they're able to access this amazing talent as a way to start thinking about how do I grow my company from 2 employees to 4, from 4 to 6, and really being able to rely on people to kind of get it and kind of understand the DNA, of the company. There's no better way to do that than to first get some exposure to those, employees through an internship program. And just unfortunately, most startups just aren't in a financial position to be able to, make that happen. So, yeah, I mean, in terms of like data that we collect, I think the strongest thing that I can say, we've been at this for 3 years with Blackstone, and when we send out the email, hey, the program is coming again, somehow they're able to read the email before we hit send because they're already responding, saying, yes, please, can we participate in the program again? And I think that's what just speaks volumes to the value.
Yeah, and I just something I want to point out here that I love and think is a real strong data point for us is that you all actually had interns supporting this work at HBCUFI through the LaunchPad pipeline and actually hired.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah,
Can you talk about that?
Kania's crushing it. She's a full-time employee. We have 2 part-time interns who we've brought back as well. And if we could, we would hire even more.
Yeah, exactly right. So I just love this because it's an opportunity to tap into a pipeline of students who just need access to opportunity, right? We're not saying, and we try to be very clear about this, although the work is under Blackstone Charitable Foundation, this is not about charity, right? This is about really aligning strong talent with business needs, right? With opportunity for them to advance in their careers, to advance economically, but then also for our companies, our partners, to really find strong talent. So we don't consider this a charitable effort. This is really us being able to kind of be a bridge, right, on both sides, both for the employer partners and also for the students as well. Okay, so as I look at the time, I just want to sort of think about, like, how do we think about the future? And we can't talk about that without having a conversation around AI. Right. And so, Sheila, I want to start with you here because I know that this is something that you are thinking about all the time. Yep. How do you integrate AI into the work that you do at BASTA? And then what benefits have you seen from its implementation? And what do you think is next?
Yep. Yeah. So the AI frenzy is here, as we all know. And I think for the work that we do with first-gen college students, I think there's this really exciting but inherent tension in what AI does. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to help young people excavate what makes them uniquely who they are, right? To like really think about what brought me here? What is so unique about my journey that sets me apart from everyone else who's going to be applying for the same role that I am? And for first-gen college students, like that journey is really important to really start to be like, okay, I didn't go to Harvard, I went to this school. I didn't have that internship, but I worked 50 hours a week. I may not have done X, Y, Z, but I did, A, B, C, and that journey is really important. And so when you think about what AI does really well, it takes the whole internet and it creates like the best, most generic person there is. And so there's an inherent tension, and what we need to do is just help to excavate what makes this person uniquely positioned and what AI does, which is like creates a really awesome generic person, right? So I think about that tension all the time in the work that we do because we cannot shortchange the work of surfacing what makes each person uniquely qualified for the world of work. So that I think is very important as like a particular tension that our field faces. And then we've collected over millions of data points with Seeker. We have 180 million data points if you take all of the work we've done over the last 8 years. And so we spent this fall in really intensive user research. Shout out, our head of product is in the audience here, and did an unbelievable job of connecting with first-gen college students who've participated in BASTA programs to really understand like where are we uniquely positioned to launch an AI tool, and what is it that young people need. And so we've zeroed in on a couple of really important things that we couldn't do, that were not doable before AI. And one of them is, what is really intimidating and what makes this partnership so elegant and special and useful for young people is having an internship board of sort of vetted opportunities is so important, and young people appreciate that so much, because when you go to the internet and try to find roles, it can be really daunting to figure out what is the right fit for you. And so what we realized is through our seeker data, we can sort of bring together what we would consider a novel data set about a young person. And so when they start to go applying for a job, when they go to Indeed or LinkedIn or wherever they go, we can start to develop what we call match scores. How well matched are you to this job, leveraging all of the unique data points that we have about you and what we can identify and learn about the job that it's online. So we're able to really ensure that young people are applying to the best fit opportunities. This was not possible pre-AI. So this is a real interesting moment, because we can now do that really quickly and really easily in a way that young people can understand, and we couldn't have done that before. So that's been a really exciting sort of feature that we've identified. We've tested with young people. They're really excited about it. And now we've got to get to work and build it into Seeker.
Yeah, and I think it's again, we're having this dual conversation
Yep.
around, like, on the student side, but also the employer partner side. If I was an employer,
Yep.
this would be a huge value add for me, right? To be able to say, oh, how do you know that this student is qualified, and this student is vetted, and to sort of walk through this process of understanding what does that look like? How do we get here? For them, it's a cost savings mechanism for them. They're getting more targeted recruitment efforts, et cetera. So I think it's a huge value add, and something that we should definitely be thinking about as we're talking to employer partners as well.
Yep.
And also just kind of going back to this whole skills notion of, like, they have the skills, right, that can match the job. And so I think that's really key. Marlon, I want to kind of move to you now. So in the age of AI and automation, how can portfolio companies really balance the integration of AI with the need for human oversight and creativity in their operations? Obviously, you're working with lean organizations, so they're not trying to bring on a ton of people, and they're going to be leveraging AI, but what do we miss without that human oversight and creativity that we're talking about students are cultivating?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think, we kind of are at a very interesting point in our kind of just in the world in general. And I have one daughter who just graduated from college, and another one who's in college right now. And wait, you're supposed to say you look too young to have kids in college. All right, I'll let that go. And to be honest, like I live in Silicon Valley, and I'm an investor. My job is to kind of think 5-10 years, ahead, and I'm scared for them. Like, I really am, in terms of the opportunities that are going to be available to them, because on one hand, we're investing in this amazing technology, AI, and all kind of past kind of revolutions that we've had as it relates to technology. Typically we're displacing what kind of the quote unquote blue collar, jobs. That's not going to be the case with this next wave. And so your ability to, I kind of think about it from a kind of a liberal arts education, standpoint, your ability to make connections across different industries. Like, I don't think it's going to be no longer kind of okay to say, oh, I'm an engineer. That's my trade. That's what I do. The fact of the matter is that the AI is being developed right now is stronger than, from a kind of a quote unquote kind of engineering kind of perspective. It can do things that even the top engineers aren't going to be able to do. And so how do you leverage this technology? How do you understand to be able to make connections across? How do you bring creativity to the workplace? Arts, being able to use your hand, like all sorts of different things that I think we've somehow in society have devalued are now beginning to become even more important. So the work that you're doing around innovation sprints, teaching students to think creatively, come up with new solutions, are all going to be kind of hugely important moving forward.
Yeah, and so we'll go over to you now, Antoine, to answer this last question. But there was a former chancellor at North Carolina A&T that said, at A&T we don't teach students what to think, we teach students how to think. And so appropriately so, as you're over the LaunchPad program at A&T, can you talk to us about how you are future-proofing students as we talk about the age of AI, et cetera? What are you doing to kind of help them understand their own value as a human in this space, and how are you preparing them to sort of position themselves in the future of work?
Like Marlon, really AI can be unsettling sometimes for me. And I see the gaps it can create, but I also see the opportunity, especially as I see my students use it on a daily basis. I think what AI does, honestly, is create the necessity for innovation skills and an entrepreneurial mindset. At one point in higher education, it was about getting to the answer, getting to it fast, and really being efficient at getting to it most often. I think now with AI and a lot of technology that's evolving right now, it has become a question about the question more than a question about the answer. And I think because of that, it creates a unique position to be able to bridge certain gaps as long as we're instilling innovation skills and entrepreneurial mindset within those students. And when you do that and teach them how to ask the right question, then they now know how to use the tool. They now know how to bridge the gap. I've seen students most recently create entire business plans within a 1-day, 2-day session. When I walk them through what to ask for, how to ask for, where should they be pulling data from, all of those types of things. And I think if we tailor that program in higher education, no matter the major, on how do we utilize your creativity, how do we utilize your critical thinking to be able to use AI as a tool, then we have a unique opportunity to position students to grow faster. And it's been interesting over the last year or so with AI is because I've, one, on the positive side, had way more students email me and say, hey, I've gotten a promotion. Honestly, because I've learned how to use these tools to be able to get more organization to the end of a project faster. On the scarier side, I've had students, as I said before, those students who frequently come to my programming have had a 50% higher GPA. I've had students who occasionally have come to programming that are emailing me and saying, hey, I went to a program or two of yours, and honestly, because I wasn't prepared with innovation skills and entrepreneurial mindset, I've either been let go or haven't been able to find employment. It's impacting me more to the point where I've actually had a few students that have actually come back and asked, could they sit in classes that I'm teaching to be able to get more of an understanding about what questions to ask, how to position themselves, and how to use AI as a better tool. Yeah. So I think there's an exponentially wonderful opportunity there. Yeah. We just have to use it and utilize it properly. I think the students are in a very interesting time in human history where throughout most of human history, the tool was always just a tool. And now that tool is borderline an employee. So we have to teach them how to use that tool so they're managing the tool so the tool doesn't start to manage them.
Yeah. This is why we are partners with everybody here on the stage. They bring such incredible wealth of knowledge and experience and support for the work that we do. Listen, we are a funder, right? But we also operate a program, a pathway, but we can't do that with the limited capacity that we have. We're a lean organization, and I've got my colleagues here in the audience, but we do incredible work, but we need support. And so it is through these types of partnerships. So I encourage you, if you're in the audience now, and you're trying to understand what does this look like for me on the ground, right? Start locally, right? Start to reach out to, if you're looking for a funder, what local funders are really supporting this work? And then who else is doing what you don't have the capacity or the expertise to do that can help you drive the work forward, because it doesn't happen in a silo, certainly doesn't happen in a vacuum, and we need everyone on this stage in order for us to do our work well. So we hope that you found this useful, helpful, that you can walk away with some tangible things to think about in terms of partnerships, in terms of what types of skills students need in order to succeed in the world of work. If you're an employer, we hope that you are inspired inspired by new and innovative ways to identify talent and build strong pipelines, particularly for a varied group of students, first generation, low income college students, and open up the aperture for access to folks who are really positioned to change the world and just need opportunities to do so. I recognize we have about 10 minutes, and if there are any questions from the audience, we're happy to take those now. I see someone coming from the back.
Hey, my name is Rachel, and I'm an academic advisor at the University of Colorado Boulder. Specifically, chemical and biological engineering is my department. And so I do student support, all the time. For students who kind of know what they want to do and have a little bit more of a direction, first gen, low-income students, what would you suggest we do as student support professionals to help them with this exposure you're talking about?
Anyone want to take that?
Yeah, sure. I wasn't. I'm like, you're like a haze. I see like a haze. You're like a sort of a shadow outline in the background there. So yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because I think that one of the first things that students will often come back to us and say is like, I went to career services and they asked if I was like networking with my parents' friends, and that just isn't an option for me, right? So I do want to name like some of the things that like we hear, and so just really trying to put ourselves sort of in the place of first gen college students. But I think the biggest thing is one, to just pressure test what exploration the young person is doing on their own. Because I think it's really important. It starts to like pull out sort of some of this entrepreneurial mindset work that we've talked about. And then what we often do is honestly work with the folks on the ground. So I do think this is like a place where if a young person, for us, if they've taken Seeker, and we can see that actually like they can connect their skills, strengths, and interests to the kinds of roles they want. They're applying for the right kinds of things. That is where partnership, I think, becomes really critical, because then we lean on folks like Antoine on the ground or Marlon to help connect them to the right opportunity within whatever the organization or company is. So I would defer to either of you on what you do when a young person's got clarity. They know what they want.
I think personally this is where intentional and strategic programming comes in. Oftentimes I think we can slip into, as employees and higher ed and centers, to only look at what does the university want and what does the corporate partner or the funder want, and really sitting down with the students and student population to be like, what skills do you want? What industries are you interested in? What do you want to go into but you really don't feel like that gap is fully bridged for you? And that is a place where I started strategically and intentionally creating programs in. So for example, I had a lot of students who were interested in energy and green energy, and they didn't know where to go. And instead of going around the campus and trying to figure out like, what do we have? I asked some questions, but I also purposely started to bridge relationships with the Department of Energy at the time. And purposely looking at our current partners and asking them questions when they were on campus to say, what are you doing in energy right now? What's your stance on energy right now? Will you partner with me to create programming around energy right now? And what that turned into was, one, exposure programming with certain partners where they're willing to come in and talk about career paths and jobs in that industry. But on the second part of it, that's where some of our innovation sprints went to. That's where some of the developmental events and competitions went. I think we need to make sure we're hearing the student's voice and making sure that if they know where they want to go and what they want to do, finding out what interests them about that place, but also what gaps they feel like they have in that area. And the reality of it is there are always a few vocal students, but a lot of them feel the exact same way. So it's utilizing those vocal students to be spokespeople for their population and bringing and integrating what they want as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments or anything you want to add to the conversation?
Go ahead.
I had a question. I'm a high schooler though, so I'm in grade 11, but I was wondering if anything like the project you said, Seeker, or any internships with startups, would those be like applicable to high school students as well?
Such a great, I'm looking at Sheila's face. She's like, I love you. So I'll answer. So our program is currently for college students, but there's certainly opportunities that exist in other programs for high school students. I will hand it over to Sheila to talk about Basta. Basta is for college students as well, but if there are other tools that you might know of for high school students similar, you can share.
The one tool that I hear talked a lot about for high school students, I'm like up here shilling a product, but I'm not sponsored by them, but Use Science is something that I hear a lot of students talk about. I think it's a pretty intensive assessment, but I think it helps to excavate like what is it at the high school level that might be interesting. We do college internships.
Yeah, we also do college students, but we do have a portfolio company called Gratify that works with high school students to help you find out what you want to do.
There's a number of high school-oriented programs actually at A&T that are career exposure-based programs, both within business but also in STEM. I would definitely suggest looking at those. Some of them last anywhere from a week to a month, where it's really about career exposure and skills development and understanding certain industries. I also run a program for incoming freshmen. So they're seniors of high school coming in who've never stepped foot on a college campus. I do it every summer. Last summer, we engaged 350 freshmen. But in that program, I challenge those students to look at their talents, gifts, and strengths and figure out how could they donate or position them within their community to be able to contribute and in many ways get work experience based on what they can do now and to work with their parents with that over the summer. So I definitely would challenge you to sit down and look at it and say, hey, what am I interested in? What am I good at, right? And based on what I'm interested in, what I'm good at, and what I think I may want my major to be in college, where can I bridge the gap between needs in my community right now and either volunteer my time, or even I've actually had high school students who've already created businesses because they were exposed to this through their siblings, where they started working with their parents and marketing those skill sets to different small businesses, especially for things like social media and stuff like that, where they were able to build before they even got to college. But I would definitely challenge you to do that.
Let me just ask you one question. Where are you from, if you don't mind asking?
Austin. I go to Vandergrift High School.
Okay, awesome. So I would recommend maybe going to your guidance counselor. They often have a lot of resources as you're thinking about your future. But I just want to commend you because, first of all, it takes a lot of courage to get up here and ask a question. And it shows that you have initiative and drive, that you're taking leadership. And these are the skills that folks are looking for. So I just want to encourage you that you're already on the right track. So continue to move forward, reach out for local resources, and I can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Rachel. Also, if there are any high school students in the room who want to walk through like the first 9 steps of that process of like looking at your talents, strengths, and gifts and how to use them, I don't mind sitting down with you for a little bit to tell you those first 9 steps and walk them through after the session.
There you go. We got a couple more minutes. Yep. Another question?
Yeah, so I think a little bit about AI and recruitment and what's going on and how difficult it is to actually get vetted. You guys are doing something that's really important to really bridge those gaps in a in-person way. But what do you think about micro-credentials or abilities to have skills that have been some way certified that aren't just course load, that actually show up so these kids can talk about them and be able to, you said market their skills. It's really hard to say, what are these skills? You ask an adult, human skills, they need to be able to market those skills, but they also need to show that they've had those experiences. How are you guys working with that for kids probably that aren't in your great programs? But
So micro-credentialing, so I've been doing this almost a decade. They've come in and out of sort of, they've been named different things, just like you have adaptive skills, durable skills, life skills, these things get renamed and repackaged. And what I've often found is, what is most valuable about the micro-credential is the experience. I did this thing, and what I learned about myself is I like this and I don't like that. Or if the micro-credential allowed you to get a name brand on your resume. There's a lot of really important, I think, advantages of going through any sort of packaged experience that gives a young person a little more information and knowledge about what they do and don't want, what they do and don't like, right? So that for me has been the most important thing. What I often find, though, is for the micro-credential to be a sort of signal or proxy to the private sector, that it adds some inherent value to a young person's portfolio, they have to have been part of creating the micro-credential. It's a proxy, like Harvard is a proxy, or a 3.7 GPA is a proxy, or a software engineering major is a proxy. So I think the actual micro-credential is almost not as important as the sort of experience.
Or their ability to talk about that
Sure,
experience. And
sure.
the big problem is for it to show up in some AI recruiting system, right?
Yeah, I mean, we have a panel next week. Google, we have some big folks on that panel, and I don't think things are quite as like AI driven as they may end up in the future, but I don't think that's quite happening yet. I do think sort of the strength of a person's sort of resume and the way they structure what they put together still matters quite a bit. We're not quite there yet.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
I think there's a very interesting balance and artful balance between the credential and the work. Like, I embed micro-credentialing into our programming, but I think the biggest thing, is what's said before, is also how do we communicate the metrics of those skills, and are students getting activities in programs that allow them to prove through metrics they know what they know, and that is a big way to bridge that gap. Is there like a really interesting balance between micro-credentialing and having those metrics?
Yeah.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate you all stopping by today. We are out of time, so we've got to stop, but we appreciate you stopping by today. Hope you took away some great things.